In April 2020, when the pandemic hit, my usual work came to a halt and COVID became the new priority. So for 4 months I worked here, and this is the Addenbrooke's Hospital Staff Testing Pod. We would usually have around 200 staff and their family members to swab each day. And we were really lucky to have a testing pod for staff set up so early on in the pandemic. If we could test someone who was suspected of having COVID and get a negative test result, they could get back to work to help fight the pandemic with their colleagues a lot sooner than the 2 weeks isolation period that the government had set at the time. And if they tested positive, we could then make sure that they stayed at home and weren't continuing to spread the virus to other hospital staff and potentially vulnerable hospital patients too. We could also then test the immediate team around them and try and catch any outbreaks before the spread could happen any further. We were effectively doing our own version of the track and trace system right from the word go. It was really important to identify staff members who didn't have any symptoms too, but tested positive. So we regularly swabbed staff members working in high-risk areas to make sure they were safe. And about 3% of people came back with a positive test result without having any symptoms. So you can imagine in a hospital where there's over 10,000 staff members, if 3% of those are spreading the virus without knowing, then it's potentially really dangerous. The testing programme is now huge, and every staff member is encouraged to get swabbed weekly, which is great. Since leaving the pod, I've been involved in quite a bit of COVID research back on the CRF. I've learned to take blood samples, and I've done that on a couple of different vaccine trials we're running here. I was part of a team that recruited 6,000 staff members to a Cambridge Bioresource research study that led to us learning a lot more about COVID antibodies. And I've been seeing patients in a COVID follow-up clinic. So these are patients that were hospitalised with COVID to see if we can learn a little bit more about the long-term effects of COVID. It's been a roller coaster of a year. I've met some amazing people and worked with some people that I would never have even met before. And I feel really proud to have played even a small part in such a big team that has been so proactive in the fight against COVID.